As we creep ever closer to a full Battlefield 6 reveal and hopefully release date, I wanted to take a look back at the series as a whole and discuss what traits, features, or mechanics, in my opinion, Battlefield 6 should take or use from each major entry in the franchise. Being a franchise that is old enough to vote at this point, the Battlefield series has had many games of varying quality and popularity. However, I still think each entry has unique qualities that I would love to see carried forward into Battlefield 6. I am fully prepared for this video to age horribly as we get more details on the game, but it is still fun to look retrospectively at the series as a whole. I'm going to go chronologically here with only the mainline games, starting with the first game in the series, Battlefield 1942. It should go without saying that Battlefield 1942 introduced many of the series staples that fans have come to love and adore, myself included. I still remember going to a local LAN place and playing hours of this game because my home PC could not handle it. I have very fond memories of this game and remember being amazed at the sheer scale of the maps and the feeling of being a tiny part of a much larger conflict. Battlefield 1942 introduced so many unique gameplay elements that really set it apart from other shooters and made it the successful brand that it is today. Introduced in 1942 and a necessity for Battlefield 6 is the overall design philosophy of large-scale mixed infantry and vehicle gameplay on massive maps. For infantry gameplay, having various classes that fulfill different roles on the battlefield is critical to the replayability, fun factor, and balance of the game. Likewise, having multiple types of land, air, and sea vehicles that can be piloted by players brings an enormous amount of gameplay variety and depth. That again sets Battlefield apart from other shooters, and it is a necessity for Battlefield 6. Also introduced in 1942 was the iconic Conquest game mode. It should really go without saying that Battlefield 6 needs Conquest, and really needs to design a lot of the maps around the mechanics of how this mode works. Another thing I would hope to see return is large pilotable vehicles such as destroyers, carriers, and subs. With a new engine and increased processing power, the team could really build some incredible things here. Now, Battlefield 1 did this to an extent with behemoths, but those fulfilled a very different type of role in my opinion, and it just wasn't quite the same. Although the Turning Tide DLC destroyers and airships came pretty close. I want to see scale though like we've never seen before in a Battlefield game. Other elements like the ticketing system and musical themes should carry forward as well. Oh, and Wake Island of course. Now let's jump forward a few decades to Battlefield Vietnam. I can't speak to this entry too much as I only played it in passing and did not put in the same hours I have with other games in the series. However, one interesting aspect that I think could be taken further in Battlefield 6 is the idea of asymmetrical factions, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. This has returned to an extent in other battlefields, but from what I can remember in Battlefield Vietnam, playing as the US versus the Vietnamese forces gave you very different weapons, tools, vehicles, and even spawn systems that weren't exactly equal, most likely in an attempt to reflect the extremely asymmetrical nature of the conflict itself. This is a very interesting idea, probably taken the furthest with the Battlefield-like game Enemy Territory Quake Wars. The concept of having completely different playstyles across factions is really intriguing and could potentially create a lot of gameplay depth and uniqueness to this entry. I'd be surprised if Battlefield 6 adopted this kind of mechanic to any meaningful degree, but it would be interesting to see it. Next, we have a true gaming classic, the beloved Battlefield 2. This is in my opinion one of the heavyweights of the franchise, and many fans consider it to be the best entry in the series for good reason. As I consider Battlefield 6, I think a lot of the design philosophies and intent behind Battlefield 2 should be what they build off of and base decisions around. I'm not saying Battlefield 2 was perfect, and there were certainly no shortage of game-breaking issues, but it was fantastic, and there are a few elements I'd love to see brought into Battlefield 6 and used as inspiration. Firstly, many of the maps in Battlefield 2 were just flat out the best in the franchise, and there's a reason some of them were reimagined and brought back for Battlefield 3 and 4. Gulf of Oman, Dragon Valley, and Strike at Karkand were incredibly well designed and memorable, and perfect playgrounds for the gameplay of Battlefield 2. The flow of the maps was excellent, although I will admit that the cluster and grenade spam around US spawn in Karkand was pretty painful to go through. This stellar map design, however, should be brought into Battlefield 6. The classes and combat roles, the strengths and weaknesses of vehicles, the squad features, the commander, the gadgets and map emplacements all worked in tandem to create something truly special in Battlefield 2, and I hope many of these elements reappear in Battlefield 6. Speaking of squad features, the ability to only spawn on a squad leader is something I'd really like to see return to standard gameplay as well. I know this exists in Battlefield 4's hardcore mode, but for those players who don't want to play hardcore, there should be a happy medium that exists here. However, I'll save this point for the next game in my list. Battlefield 2 also introduced the squad system, and this is of course an absolute necessity for Battlefield 6. Squads should promote teamwork and cooperation, and are a big differentiator from the lone wolf running and gunning of, say, a Call of Duty. However, with a larger number of players than ever before basically confirmed already, I think it's time to increase the squad number to 6 or maybe even more in Battlefield 6. Not too large, mind you, but the 4-man squad in Battlefield is just a bit too small for me. Now with our squad size backed up, another aspect I would bring from Battlefield 2 is increased class variety and number. The 4-class system is fine, but there are some strange and forced overlaps that could be broken out into different classes here. Having each class fulfill a distinct role with specific strengths and weaknesses should work to promote good squad play. Two more things I would pull from Battlefield 2 is general pacing and the commander. For the former, the gameplay of Battlefield 2 seemed slower and more tactical, dolphin diving notwithstanding, and while Battlefield has always been arcadey, this did further differentiate the series from other fast-paced shooters. As for the commander, this was a really interesting feature that could be fleshed out even more, and while it did technically return in Battlefield 4, was disappointingly dumbed down and streamlined quite a bit. I'd love to see a return of physical commander assets on the map, as well as more in-depth abilities and mechanics to coordinate and reward squads. There is a ton of room for improvement here, and I would hate to see the commander be dropped again. Whew, with that all out of the way, let's jump a century or so ahead to Battlefield 2142. A love it or hate it entry, I remember 2142 being pretty divisive at launch, coming out hot on the heels of its predecessor. Even within the same year as Battlefield 2's Euroforce and Armored Fury, 2142 was seen by many as an oversaturation and a rush job by DICE. However, despite some weaknesses at launch, 2142 is undeniably an extremely unique and special addition to the Battlefield lineup. Now, this is going to be a relatively hot take, as I know by far a return to a modern setting is the most requested setting for Battlefield 6, but the major thing I want Battlefield 6 to take from 2142 is the futuristic setting itself. Now, I know it's a long shot, as a return to modern warfare is the safest option, and after the lackluster reception and performance of Battlefield 5, the studio is looking for something safe. However, I would still love a new and experimental take on a futuristic conflict for the Battlefield series. Just let the designers and team go crazy with it, implementing unbelievable and wild gadgets, vehicles, classes, and map design that allows for that amazing sandbox Battlefield gameplay that we all love. As excited as I am to see the latest, beautifully rendered M4 for the 1000th time, I'd also love to see something truly special for the latest entry. Back to the spawn system I mentioned in the Battlefield 2 section, Battlefield 2 and 2142 only allowed players to spawn on their squad leader, promoting a different playstyle for that role. However, 2142 gave the spawn leader the spawn beacon gadget. This gadget has reappeared a few times, but not assigned specifically to the squad leader, and I'd love to see a return to this system. The last thing I would like Battlefield 6 to bring from 2142 is Titan Mode. Even though it was extremely janky at times, Titan Mode was at least something new and created some incredibly epic moments. Imagine a new, massive scale Titan Mode taking full advantage of the new engine and hardware with ships so large the interiors are basically small maps. Complete warfare with mixed aerial and ground combat. Carrier Assault in Battlefield 4 was an attempt to recreate this magic, but was constrained by the setting itself, which further fuels my argument to go futuristic or even alt history in Battlefield 6. Next, I'll be skipping past the first Bad Company and on to everyone's favorite entry in the franchise. The question isn't what should Battlefield 6 take from Battlefield Heroes, it's what shouldn't it take. The art direction, gameplay, effects, engine, and free-to-play model should all be directly ported over. Battlefield 6 could be the new Fortnite. Nah, I'm just kidding. I never played this game and know absolutely nothing about it other than I had no interest in ever playing it. If you know of some amazing mechanic or gameplay element from Heroes that absolutely must be in Battlefield 6, let me know in the comments below. Let's continue to Bad Company 2. Despite casualizing and streamlining many of the systems from previous games, Bad Company 2 was just plain fun and immersive. I'm happy to say that many of the elements I loved in Bad Company 2 have been carried forward in the franchise. Things like destruction, excellent sound engineering, and rush are now all staples of the series themselves, and should of course appear in Battlefield 6. I know many players feel the level of destruction was much greater in Bad Company 2, however this is a bit exaggerated in my opinion, as the maps were smaller and many buildings were the same cut and paste shacks. As much as I love destruction, I also prefer great map design and flow, and as great as the maps were in Bad Company 2, many of them could turn into total nightmares for the attacking forces, as trees and buildings were leveled and cover became more and more scarce. Besides the features I've already listed, something else I'd love to see brought into Battlefield 6 from Bad Company 2 is the lack of lock-on weaponry, taking balance into consideration of course, but I feel that lock-on weapons can dumb down the experience quite a bit. Now strap in as we jump into Battlefield 3. While most Battlefield games have been gorgeous on release, Battlefield 3 was truly stunning and cutting edge at the time, and still looks fantastic to this day. This is the game that really stepped up the overall production values and presentation of the series. This idea of Battlefield being the best looking shooter on the market really needs to come back for Battlefield 6, and I'm hoping the team can deliver here and stun us with incredible graphical fidelity and assets, in an attempt to recapture that moment of seeing Battlefield 3's gameplay for the first time. Let's just hope there's no blue tint this time. Another aspect I hope carries from Battlefield 3 to 6 is the overall feel of the weapons and gunplay. Despite netcode issues and some weapon imbalances, the guns were extremely satisfying to use in Battlefield 3 and they just felt great. The recoil, bullet drop, and overall gunplay was some of the best in the entire series, in my opinion. I really hope the team looks to this for inspiration, more than some later entries. The only other thing I'll mention here that Battlefield 6 should take from 3 are the hilarious voice lines of the soldiers in-game. They were instantly iconic and added so much flavor, and I still remember many of the lines to this day. I don't have much more to say here, so let's move on to Battlefield 4. This is the entry that just barely edges out Bad Company 2 as the one I've put the most hours into, and there's many reasons why. Battlefield 4 was a complete mess at launch, and this lack of QA and polish is the last thing I want the team to bring to Battlefield 6. However, after years of DLCs, patches, and updates, Battlefield 4 to me is still one of the greatest multiplayer shooters I've ever played. The sheer number of gadgets, weapons, attachments, maps, vehicles, and gameplay elements gives the player a true sandbox with plenty of toys to play with. The action in this game felt so organic and unscripted, and it led to so many incredibly emergent highlights throughout the round. Battlefield 4 features an almost over-the-top level of customization and options for weapons and vehicles, and even though the gameplay stood on its own merits, the progression to unlock these was insanely addicting. While I understand that many of the attachments could be seen as redundant or just cosmetic, having the options anyways was still awesome. For me, the customization and sandbox nature of the gameplay is what I hope the team brings into Battlefield 6, and innovates and pushes this further, not necessarily in the way that Battlefield 5 did with customizable soldiers, but with ideas such as customizable gadgets, squad features, and vehicles to a greater degree. While the idea of Levolution was a bit gimmicky, some maps did implement it in a way that did drastically change the gameplay. While I personally didn't always like the ways it changed map flow and layout, it was a novel idea that should be reintroduced and reiterated on in Battlefield 6. Other features that should be brought over are the custom servers and team balancing of Battlefield 4. Skipping past Hardline, as I am still yet to play it, we dive headfirst into the trenches of Battlefield 1. One of my favorite entries in the series, Battlefield 1 did some remarkable things that I still appreciate as I play it to this day. As I stated in my Battlefield 1 video linked here, the one word I use to describe this game is grit. This entry immersed me into its world like none other in this list, and it's due to some tightly focused and realized game design. Everything from effects, sounds, mechanics, map design, and game modes were all designed to completely immerse the player into this particular setting and conflict. This grit is what I want to see brought forward into Battlefield 6. I want to be boots on the ground with my soldier and take in the incredible atmosphere and feeling of being in a large-scale battle, with all the hallmarks of DICE's standout visuals, music, and sounds. Battlefield 1 is also gorgeous, and has better lighting than Battlefield 5 in my opinion, and this level of immersion and detail in a futuristic setting would be absolutely amazing. Dynamic weather was also formally introduced in Battlefield 1, whereas it only appeared in 4 as a Levolution. This impacted gameplay in some really cool ways, and I'd love to see it carried forward into 6. Especially if we return to the 2142 era. Having dynamic snowstorms or quick freezes that forces players to adapt and change their strategy on the fly would be incredibly cool, no pun intended. Despite their unpopularity, I still think there's a place for a behemoth type mechanic in Battlefield. Something to give the losing team an edge instead of just getting pounded into the dirt is greatly appreciated. And while the behemoths didn't always live up to this balancing act, it was at least an attempt to resolve this issue. I've spent far too many rounds in various battlefields, helpless in my spawn as enemy fire penned me and my team in with no hope for escape. The last thing I will mention here is Operations mode. Conquest is a classic and necessary for a Battlefield game, but Operations was a surprisingly well done and captivating addition in Battlefield 1. The progression through the map and focused chaos of fighting on a true front of war is extremely engaging and rewarding on both attackers and defenders' sides. Map quality and design varied of course, with some granting huge advantages to one side or the other, but I would hate to see this mode dropped as it created some amazing moments. Finally, rounding out my list, we have the latest entry in the series, Battlefield 5. And we have arrived at Battlefield 5, which despite its issues and unpopularity with a majority of players, has many elements and mechanics I would love to see return in Battlefield 6. In this list, I have avoided talking about the negative elements that I don't want to see return, and I will do the same here. However, I just want to quickly note that without major reworking, I definitely do not want to see a return to soldier customization and skins as found in Battlefield 5 in Battlefield 6. Not only were the majority of them just horribly designed and ugly in my opinion, they also ruined soldier silhouettes and class recognizability, negatively impacting gameplay. It didn't help that so many of them were just hideous. But with that out of the way, there were some cool changes here I'd love to see return in Battlefield 6. Reviving was reworked, with squad mates able to revive each other, and medics able to revive everyone much quicker, although not instantly like the syringe spam in Battlefield 1. Medics and supports were also given the syringe and the repair tool automatically, freeing up their gadget slots for other tools. This further promoted squad play, and the risk versus reward of taking the time to revive a fallen squad mate added another interesting element to the gameplay. On a related note, another new addition to 5 was the ability to look around and rotate the camera when you were downed and waiting for revival, and this was a good change as well. The attrition system, despite needing some tweaks, was intriguing as well, and part of a larger effort in Battlefield 5 to improve and promote teamwork and squad play. I really hope this design intent, if not all of its implementation in Battlefield 5, reappears in Battlefield 6. Battlefield games should reward good teamwork, and a well-equipped and coordinated squad should be able to make the difference between victory and defeat. Anything that promotes this type of gameplay over lone wolf running and gunning is a positive for me, and sets Battlefield apart from other shooters. Spotting, in general, remains one of my least liked mechanics in the series, and I was happy to see it toned down tremendously in Battlefield 5. A minor change I also enjoyed was tank turret turning speed. That's like a tongue twister. It felt more realistic and actually impacted some strategic decisions you had to make as a tanker. Fortifications were also really cool, and I'd hate to see those dropped completely as well. Ignoring much of the extraneous stuff associated with Battlefield 5, the core gameplay was incredibly solid in my opinion, and a step in the right direction for the series. Many of these core gameplay loops should return in Battlefield 6, and with a more unified vision of what the game should be, could create one of the best Battlefield games in the franchise. Overall, I remain incredibly excited for Battlefield 6 and to see what the team has in store for us in this latest iteration. There are so many other things I could talk about here, so if you enjoyed the video and breakdown, leave a like and subscribe and I'll be happy to make more like it. If you would disagree with anything on my list or feel like I missed something, please let me know in the comments as well. Until next time.